You are listening to Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 129, Yes and Improving with Improv. In today's episode, we take a look at improving your games with improvisation. We discuss some basic rules to improv a scene. We also elaborate on each rule and give examples on how to improvise better. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me in person today, I've got Josh. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So let's see here. Some updates for the podcast. Stay tuned for October. Live play is coming out. We're working on these backlog items as well. My life has been chaotic the last couple of weeks. Wife is in the nesting phase of the pregnancy, so it's a lot of fun at my household. Let's put it that way. As we're tearing everything out in preparation to put things back in. If you know, you know. But today, Josh and I are going to talk about the topic that you provided was yes and ellipsis improve with improv. So this is an episode all about improv or just improving your stories in terms of improving with your players or improving in a situation. Maybe we call it fancy dancing in previous episodes. This sort of fits a little bit into Just Say Yes. I kind of had a little pre-show talk with Josh about it. But it's an interesting topic on kind of how to move forward with improv. And Josh has a little document, so I'm going to let Josh take us away on this.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you could get out today and record this. The whole point of the Improve with Improv, and the reason I wanted to bring it up, was because I found in some of my recent games that structured story where you are following a linear path without any sort of deviation gets boring quick. And I think we've all been there. You know, if you've got like a document that you're working off of and your players want to sort of dance around, they want to try a new thing, they want to sort of explore a situation, find a different way to solve a puzzle, then if you don't let them do that, it gets really stuffy and they don't get very happy very quick.
Well, you can't keep players on a linear path, okay? No. Unless you have to have, again, KYP, know your players. Some players really like a linear structured path, and they want the GM to sort of bring them to the next plot point. Most players that I have ever played with, most people I ever talked to, their players are not like that. Their players like to, they say they want something that's more of the sandbox type game, but they don't really want a sandbox. They want like an amusement park. They want to see rides and attractions they can interact with, but they want to have it sort of defined, and they can kind of tell you where they want to go.
Yeah. A key example of this was we ran a Water Dragon heist a little while ago, and if you guys have played that, the first chapter is sort of like introduction, really straightforward. 1, 2, you're done. You know, at the end of it, you get yourself a little manor. You got to build it up. And that's chapter 2. Chapter 2 is just sort of a free-form adventure. It's got a whole lot of suggestions, not a lot of structure, and it is really up to you and your players to sort of fill it in. And the story goes that as soon as you feel like it's reached its climax, that chapter is like finally worked, then you switch back into the linear story that goes 3 to the end. And while my players love Chapter 2 because we improved all sorts of different scenes, they had a whole bunch of, and it's very much like improv because the book gives you a single line for a scene, and you just sort of have to fill in the gaps. Like, who's there? What are they wearing? Is it, is it Fancy Hat Day? And we went all out. And that chapter 2 was probably 2/3, maybe more, of the time that entire game session went. It was a couple of months that we played this thing, and chapter 2 was the majority of the time, and that's the time that people really enjoyed, because it allowed them to take actual options. So I went into and looking about different ways that you can improve or use improv to improve the stories.
Sorry, we got elephants in the house.
Do we need to, wait a second?
No. We got it.
Okay.
If you hear any thumping or snapping or anything else, we got snap, crackle, pop in the house.
You're getting ready for kids, and my kids are just getting ready. Okay.
What's interesting is that I remember I talked to you about your Dragon Heist game, and I remember talking to you about how the transition from the second part and the third part was always it didn't go well. The players didn't like the third part. So the thing that you do have to realize is that in any game where you do improv, and if you have an intention to end the game, okay, they're eventually going to end up back on the linear path. However, I think what happened that was weird in the Dragon Heist game, the way that you described it, and maybe one way that you could have mitigated it, is that the thing that brought you into the third part seemed very abrupt, and there was no cues as to why the events happen that brings you to that third part. So I feel like probably in the second part, if you were to do that, if you know Dragon Heist, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you know Dragon Heist, in the second part, you should probably be giving clues unto the third part to make it that everything that you are sort of doing feeds into that, and that it makes some thematic sense that you maybe transition to that phase.
Yes. I actually did have a lot of clues sprinkled throughout chapter 2.
Oh, yeah, you told me that nobody picked up.
Well, no, it's worse, is that I went too far into the whole improv thing, and some of the fantastic situations that we're in were so interesting that the clues were just sort of like, oh, that's just got to be random crap that's being thrown in. And
the improv was the star, the clues that actually led to the story. People were like,
was boo. It was like, oh, he's saying another thing. That's just him just making stuff up. And so when it came around, a lot of that got lost. And especially when you've got like a long period of time before you've got any sort of payoff. If you don't have somebody that's dedicated to taking notes or following threads, and they just play by the seat of their pants, because let's face it, who's actually taking notes, then it's going to be difficult to put those threads together. But that being said, that section 2 went really well, and incorporating some of that style would have probably made the rest of the story a lot better as well.
Maybe if you had hijacked a little bit of that style and just the third piece, so the third piece felt a little bit more coherent to what you had done with the second portion of it.
Use, when you have a pre-written adventure, when you're, taking it from White Wolf, or you're taking it from Wizards of the Coast, or you're taking it from whoever makes one of those other games. I just was looking through my books. All of them are terrible. When you take any sort of pre-written story, if you want to have it with a set of players it's out and adventuring and having a good time, and they're having things like this, use it like an improv. Use the scene as somebody setting the scene. Use the parts as just sort of like stagecraft, but don't leave it there.
No, that makes sense. I mean, you want to make sure that your players are, again, you want to the game is to basically effectively, all successful games cater to your players to some extent, and this set set of kind of rules that you have here. I think you said that there were like
There's 6, and we'll get
there's 6 of them. You said that you read a bunch of different improv things, and there's like the 5 rules, the 6 rules, the 7 rules, the 8 rules.
The 6
but Josh set up the 6 rules that he follows here. But I think that you're trying to cater to your audience, and you're trying to build the best possible game. And the problem with the prepackaged module that you're gonna find as you kind of go about your role playing career is that the prepackaged module, I guess it lacks for flexibility. Mm-hmm. It offers you a really good structured adventure, and if nobody knows what's going on, that's great. But it lacks for the flexibility, and by taking it upon yourself being creative and doing the flexibility in the second part, you really kind of screwed up the rest of the adventure.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I've read a number of different discussions where people have said that they started Waterdeep Dragon Heist, they got to chapter 2, and then never continued, and just went on and made chapter 2, and then built actual,
build a game around
build
what
a
they
game,
did.
or homebrew at that point. So you've got yourself the tavern, you got yourself, an adventuring league, because you built the damn thing, and then who cares about the rest of the story? It's unimportant at that point. You've got people that are enjoying the game. Let them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So let's go into these 6 rules then. So they kind of.
All right. Well, let's just go over the rules themselves, and we'll dive into each of them.
Okay. So you said number 1, say yes to your players. Okay, we'll dive into that. It's not just the just say yes topic that we've talked about before. Number 2 is after saying yes, add something. Number 3 is ask questions that progress the scene. Number 4 is you can look good by making the players look good. Number 5 is be willing to fail. And number 6 is relax. It's just a game. Seems pretty easy, right? Ha! All right. That's the too long didn't read version of this podcast. You can shut it off now if you want.
Thank you for coming. We'll talk to you next week.
But let's go into these maybe one by one. So say yes to your players. And again, this is different than I think just say yes. Maybe it has a little bit of overlap. We'll figure that out. So,
well, and it does. You want your players to engage in your game. And you want them to feel free to express their creativity and to come up with interesting situations, or even if they see something in your story that you didn't necessarily intend, and they ask you a question, sometimes that's a yes. One thing that stands out to me, we were talking about the players had to go meet with a butcher who was a front for some people that were moving some drugs, and it was in a bad part of town, and the thing said that it was like exotic type meats, and they exotic type meats. Is he a cannibal? Now the book doesn't say anything about that. The story's nothing about it. It was supposed to be like he's dealing with meats from foreign shores and stuff like that, and weird animals. I'm like, nope, he's a cannibal now. And we led into that, and it was him talking about, well, I'm not a cannibal. I would never eat, my own kind. But there's a lot of kind in this city, and I provide for those who have a more distinguished taste. And it became a thing. And then they were buying meat from the cannibal to serve at their tavern. And it was a thing because the players asked. So I said yes, and lead into it.
The truth is that a lot of those decisions are so small that it doesn't make one look a difference either way that you would have answered that question. But it did add flavor to the character by saying yes.
And because they asked a question like that, and I said yes, that encourages them to ask other questions. Like, did I pick something up? Did I come up with this? It doesn't matter. You get that engagement. Mm-hmm. And that's really the name of the game here is engaging with your players.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I like the say yes to the players also is if they want to, try something different, if they want to solve a puzzle a different way, engaging in a social situation. All of these things are, it's not shut the players down.
The say yes is inviting the players to tackle your story the way that they wish to tackle your story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're, again, this goes into the subject of trying to avoid shoehorning your players into one solution. And the just saying yes is you realizing that your players are picking up on a specific way to solve a problem or interact with an NPC. And you are leaning into that and going, yes, I'm going to explore that. I'm going to let my players sort of have that. And your players are none the wiser because your players didn't know that you built it one way or another, but you've made a decision to take care of that and, and do that for your players. And so now your players think like, whoa, it makes you look like a freaking wizard is what it makes you look like.
Which is the point of this thing. Yes. No, absolutely. Another example that I had was in a different game. I had one of the players wanted to be he wanted to play a boxer, but this was about the time that either Endgame came out or Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, basically. And this player wanted to make a boxing glove that he would
destroy half the universe when you punch someone.
He wanted to put gems in it, and he wanted it to do various things. And well, yes, you can definitely do that. But here's what you're going to have to go and do to make these things happen. And he's probably like, we talk about rewards. We talk about how gold is completely useless in most of these games. Money becomes a trivial matter. He's probably spent more money building this just to like basic levels than you would on any other item, because he spends everything he's got building this because he has the opportunity. He asked, can I do this thing? And I came up with a plan. Like, here's the people you need to talk to. Here's the materials you're going to need to get. You're going to have to go and find these special gems. You can only slot this many gems at a time. You got to pick which gems during the fight that you're actually going to use because it takes a while for them to sink in. And then here's how the actual mechanics work. And then you can upgrade it later by doing more and bigger adventures. And it became its own quest within the overarching quest. Mm-hmm. This sort of sub-story that sort of happens as it goes on. And he's more invested in the character. He's more interested in what's going on. And it's not a game-breaking item. It's this massive amount of flavor on top of what's going on that turns, ordinary item, an ordinary thought, like, I just want to punch things. I think it'd be fun just to go around and punch stuff. Great. Let's do it.
I think what's interesting with that, too, is that you do have to be careful with so the one caveat to just saying yes in a lot of situations, this is more of a feel thing. So for a newer DM, this might be harder. And even for an experienced DM, this is probably quite challenging as well, is understanding when you say yes to something, making sure that you are not unbalancing your game with what you say yes to.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, because you said, sure, let's do this thing with the gauntlet there. And I think that's really cool. I think that almost what you need to do with that is if you say yes to something of that effect, you sort of need to have it be like, yes, and we'll talk about that more later once I think about it.
Well, that actually goes directly into the second point I have on this list, is that after saying yes, you add something. So you say yes to your players, but you don't just leave it there. You don't just say yes. If they want to tackle a new situation, if they want to try a new thing, if they want to, look for a haberdashery, yes. And you make it your own. You build into it. This has two benefits. One, you have a limiting factor without saying no. You're not shutting a person down. You are putting the kibosh on rampant, insane growth, while still allowing the players to express individuality, to express creativity, to come up with new situations and new solutions. But also, the second part is that you look like a wizard because you said, of course you find a haberdashery. It's Mama Miglione's hats aplenty. But they're running low on feathers and they need you to go get some. Just make stuff up. You build the scene and they're like, oh, well, Mama Miglione's needs feathers?
And not any feathers, but the feathers of a harpy.
And now you've got a quest.
There you go.
And they wanted a haberdashery. They wanted some fancy hats for the fancy party. And now they've got to go find some harpies. Yeah, so when you say yes, you add something. So when I was asked, can I make Thanos' gauntlet to punch things? I'm like, yes. Here's what you're going to do. Here's the limiting factors. Here's your new quest. Here's the people you get to talk to. And came up with a new section of town that had things. You wander off to a university to find out about the mystical, magical properties of metal and how to work them into magical items. It became an adventure.
Don't be afraid when I hear this and you say you're going to add something. So let's say you do add something to it. You said yes to something. It is now something that appears overpowered to the player or to your group or unbalances your story in some way. You said yes, and you used it in that scene or that moment. Don't be afraid to then scale back its power. Don't undo what you just did, okay? You can't undo the scene, okay? Yeah, Jared gave us in one of his games, he never thought we'd use the damn thing. This
That's such a brutal call. I think we've all been there at one point.
Yeah, he didn't think we were going to use this thing. He gave it to us at the end of a scene. He gave us this like Valkyrie from another dimension in our game. Gave us he gave Brian a way to buy off his one arm flaw, which was like basically a mechanical arm. And they also gave us this wand thing that had like a button on it. And basically what it is it's like a flamethrower, like compacted into a wand. Okay? Didn't know what that's what it was. Okay? But in a future game, we were dealing with some cultists, and the way that we were going to break into their compound was we ended up setting their crop field ablaze with this flamethrower. And Jared had never expected us to use it. So we did use it on the crop field, and it went like and it set the thing of it's like a dragon shooting fire. And I'm like, whoa, that's freaking crazy. And then, of course, we had it the entire way through, and our ultimate big bad guy happened to be a vampire, and we were in a place with tight corridors, so, it was bad news for him. But the interesting thing is that in the next story, we opted not to take it. But had we decided to take it, he could say, like, it's out of juice at the moment. Like you could do a lot of things to scale that back because it's a freaking flamethrower that's compact and handheld. Okay, there's a lot of ways that like you could have probably scaled back that power. And so if you see your players go like, "Oh my god, he gave me the sword of 1,000 truths. I can now decapitate everything in one blow." You go, "Oh yeah, I did," but you used all the magical charges on it, and now it's just a regular old sword. Okay, like it was really cool in the moment. It's not so cool anymore. Or if you really want it to continue to be cool, you have to build into it. So that's a way that you can get away from it, and it doesn't detract anything the players didn't have before. Mm-hmm. Okay, you might think your players would go, "Oh man, that's so terrible. Why'd you do that? Why did you take away my cool power?" No, it'd be a different thing if you had them use the power for like the entire game, and you're getting to like the final boss. You're like, "Dude, he's decapitating everything with one blow," and you're like, "It stopped working."
The final guy doesn't have a neck. I mean, that's the way you do it. No, and I think to the point you do, if you say yes and give somebody even a moderately overpowered or just like slightly overpowered item, it's always a good idea to let them use it in an exaggerated way at least once, so they feel like they've earned something in doing that.
I think that actually fits into part 4 of this. So I guess I'm skipping a little bit ahead on it, but it's just an interesting point. There is a way that you can pull it back though after you do that. I'm just letting people know that without ruining like the immersion of what happened within a game.
Yeah,
You get to give players that moment to be like, I am a golden god. Like,
which is a great experience and makes you look great and makes everybody happy.
yes.
But this is part of the whole thing, is that when you say yes to something like this, it is on you as the person who has said yes to add that either limiting factor or to add more to the scene so that you can then encourage further creativity, further improv from your players. Let them, like, they have come up with a thing and now you have added on to it. So now it is a bigger thing. It's a different thing. How are they going to do this new thing? And by doing this, you can build bigger scenes. You can build more interesting encounters, more interesting characters, and you can have sort of this back and forth with your players, creating this world. It becomes a communal event. This common storytelling that we're all involved in, rather than just you reading flavor text. And that's really what we want.
Exactly. So we touched on part 3, which is ask questions that progress the scene.
Yeah. So asking questions. So when you read any of these, like how to do improv, or you take an improv class, one of the key things they talk about is don't ask open-ended questions. Don't, like, Mama Miglione's hat shop wants to know, what kind of hats do you like? Or, what's your favorite plate of spaghetti?
I guess that's a good point. Don't make the players figure out the material they need to get. They want cool hats. That's their goal.
Yeah.
Mama Miglione says, I make hats out of feathers.
And she says, you want a big feather, don't you? See, you ask questions, but you don't ask open-ended questions. You ask yes or no questions. Like, everybody wants a big feather. Everybody likes the big feather. Mama Miglione's makes big feathered hats. You like big feathered hats, don't you? And your players are like, well, yes. Yes, we do. Or, no, we can't do. No, you have to have a big hat. You have to have the big feathered hats. And you lead into it. It becomes a yes or no question, because that progresses the scene. You can also ask yes or no questions to your players to make them come up with new things. Is that a bow and arrow that you have there? Do you think you could find me some harpies?
That's a good another good point there, which is that you could sort of let the players engage to the level they want to within the scene there, which is the players want cool hats, but they don't know what kind of cool hat they want, and that's when Rob Miglione can then give you the direction to make the cool hat. Well, you have to have the big feathered hat, okay? But maybe your players are like, I want a Trask hide hat.
And then Mama Miglione's like, I don't think I've ever done that before. That sounds amazing. Would you put the horns on it? Or is it just the hide? And, it's a yes or no. Yeah. It's sort of a yes or no question at that point, but it leads into it. And so, yes, you've said yes. You've added something, and then you're asking yes or no questions to sort of progress the scene, to keep it going. But you are asking questions, because you can't just be throwing things back and forth. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with the worst gumbo of a scene ever, because you're just throwing everything at it. You have to sort of, you limit what you're doing without saying no. You ask yes or no questions to sort of refine the ideas, and then you've got everything together. The players have created a situation. You've enhanced it. You've asked questions to define and refine what they're looking for. And now you've got a scene that has been created by your players. It's involved their storytelling and their own ingenuity, and you have made it interesting and fit within your world.
I like one of your little points here, which is don't punish the players for bad answers, which is that's a very important point, especially because your players probably never planned for this scene. So nothing you should really do that is unplanned should really be too like, again, this is sort of a GMing philosophy that I have, which is trying to avoid being super antagonistic against your players. And that would be one of those things where it's like, well, it's time to murder you for that bad answer.
Yeah.
Mama Miglione don't like that answer.
No, and I've had some situations where you have like, you've got to answer some questions, you got to come up with some answers, you're sort of solving puzzles or riddles or whatnot, and you've got that one guy who's like, I just like hitting stuff. And Mama Miglione turns to and says, oh boy, I knew a guy back in Old Village. He wasn't very bright either. You're a lot like him. Very hot. And, just sort of lead into that and be like, Mama Miglione now comes over and like leans in and is like, so, after they're done with the harpies, you do anything afterwards? And you're sort of encouraging it without necessarily denigrating the person.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of playing into all levels of player at that point, which is that some players are going to give you things that sound so outlandish and weird that you're like, yeah, you have to kind of read context into that too. Like sometimes your players are going to say some things, or they won't be able to eloquently express them within the confines of their character.
Yeah.
So this is a good way of being like, okay, you don't have a good answer, then this is how we kind of get around that.
Yeah. And that's what the questions are there for. You ask those questions, sort of refine their ideas, because some of these ideas are going to be you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, and you sort of figure out what is the best way to get to what they're looking for and still progress a scene and build something that's interesting. And I think that all leads into my fourth point, which is you can look good by making your players look good.
Yes, because your players are your players will remember very specific scenes within your game. I can point to scenes that every player has this where they look back and they go, this is some of the defining moments of this game, or some of the defining moments of my gaming career. You don't remember everything, but you remember some of the really big, impactful scenes, or some of the scenes that were just really fun. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is one of those situations where you kind of make those scenes that your players will likely remember because they're fun. Hey, remember when we did this? Okay, because you said that you wanted a Trask hide helmet, and we had to grow that halfling to gargantuan size to be able to suplex the Trask.
Yeah. And then you had to find a dentist that was able to actually extract the tusks so that you could put it on the head. It was insane. But by doing that, by making, letting your players get to that point and then doing something fun with it, I think that also, like we were saying before, if you give them a slightly overpowered item, it may happen. If you are saying yes to things willy-nilly, don't worry about it.
You can let them have their fun, and then you can scale down the item.
Let them have their fun in a way that really sort of lets them shine. They pull out that item that, maybe it won't work again later, but this time, man, it really did everything they hoped and maybe a little bit more, and really, shines big, because your players are there the same reason you're there, to have a good time. This is entertainment. This is us working together to have an entertaining session. And if we can do that, and everybody's having a good time with it and moving forward and sort of working together at it, then yeah, you look good when your players look good. Make them shine.
It's a good point. Again, KYP, know your players, know what they enjoy, know what they like, know how to make them the spotlight, know how to shine the spotlight upon them. And again, don't be afraid of making some decisions that are, maybe questionable at the time. I guess don't be afraid is actually one of the, was that one of the points? I don't remember. But
no, it's just one of the sub points in there. I think, the next point is be willing to fail. Yeah. Don't be afraid of failure. It happens. you may have built out a big scene. You may have worked with your players to come up with all sorts of fun and interesting things. You may have refined asking the questions, and then you may have, tried to give them the opportunity to really shine in it. And sometimes all that goes through and falls flat on its face. And that is something that just happens. You can roll with it. You can absolutely roll with it. That is, now you've created a new scene. And start back at the beginning. Failure is not the end. Failure is a new option. And your players may not have seen it going in, but it is something where now that they've reached this point, something has gone wrong. They need to improv. They need to come up with a new solution to this new problem. And that's fun too. Because now you've got, bigger stakes, or something weird has gone wrong. You wanted to make your Trask hat and you got all the way through it, and I have no idea what went wrong with the Trask hat now. Oh, you went and
you saw how big the Trask was, and you're like, you know what? Maybe I don't need that Trask hat anymore.
Like, you get everybody there to fight the Trask, and the Trask just like crushes the dentist in the first hit. You're like, oh, I guess I don't need teeth. And then just like,
I think this is a bad idea.
yeah. Where are those harpies? And
that feather hat's looking really good, right?
Yeah. And it can be a fun adventure to sort through the failure. And that's definitely something you can do. There's a point under 4 that I had, which was reward creative choices. And that really does lead into, the failure as well. Just because somebody failed doesn't mean that their choice was wrong. Things happen. That's the roll of the dice.
You can come up with bad plans, and you can come up with bad ideas, and you're going to end up, your players are going to fail from time to time. Nothing is fail forward.
Yes.
Okay. Always fail forward. Be that if something happens to be a failure, let the players find the way, to keep going. Like, have them be able to get through the next bit of whatever they're trying to do. And don't tie anything that you have that's incredibly important to one skill. And so if your player fails, you're done and it's over. Like, this is the opposite of that. Be ready to improvise into the next thing. Your player failed, guess what? We're going to find another way.
And if you've got the world-ending prophecy dependent on one of your player characters, and they could die, don't do that. Just a thought.
Don't do it.
But yes, you let your players make bold choices. You reward creativity. Even if they fail, the story doesn't. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. And that leads off to the last point that was on my list here. Relax. It's just a game.
And without even going into any of the sub-points, I'm pretty sure that's self-explanatory. It is just a game. Okay? Your players... Nothing you do cannot be undone through creative storytelling. Okay? Nothing that you do in the game is so game-breaking, unless you actually party wipe the players, but that's a whole different subject. As long as your players are able to kind of get out with some scars, whatever it may be, or, hey, we lost the dentist and it was a really bad idea. We're not going to go fight a Trask in the future. Like, the harpies were really a good idea. She was right. I really did want that big feathered hat.
Yeah. Or like, on the way to the harpies from the Trask, you ran into a Naga, and now we've got some boots.
There we go. Again, there's a lot of ways that you can get by it and, enjoy it. If your players are enjoying it, you should kind of keep going and enjoying it too. That doesn't mean don't do anything. Don't just tell stories on behalf of your players. And so they're the only ones having a good time and you hate the story you're telling. Okay. I remember I had brought that up in a previous game previous podcast, and that was pointed out. I'm like, yeah, no, you're right. You can't completely go like all player choice and like all what the players want, and expect that you're going to be happy with the way the game turns out. So again, just find that balance there, and just again, it's a game. Don't let anyone upset you because they keep making really crazy improv choices. Don't get frustrated because they keep defeating all your villains really cleverly. That's a good thing. Okay? That's a better problem to have than the reverse problem, which is that you've got paralyzed players who don't want to make any choices.
Well, and I think that if you are getting frustrated with the improv, then you're missing out on steps 2 and 3. You're not adding to it when they come up with something, and you're not defining it with your necessary questions. And if you're frustrated by this whole thing because they're doing so well against what's going on, you're ignoring step 4, where you're just making you're looking good because they're doing well. It's just a game. One of the points I had on here was, you can let things get weird or funny or sad because that's sometimes the mood. You should know your players, but your players are people, and people change day to day. They may be in a funny mood or a weird mood, and sometimes a session can go that way. That doesn't break your world. That doesn't screw things up. It's interesting. Not every day in a world is going to be exactly the same.
Again, good points that you brought up there. No, I think we kind of hit on everything. You have anything else you want to add to this?
No, I think if you follow these sort of ideas, make it your own, you're going to have some very interesting sessions, and you're going to have a lot better player engagement. And I think we're all going to enjoy it better that way.
That sounds good. I couldn't have said it any better myself. So that's going to wrap us up for to this recording here. If you have ever used some form of improv, if you have thoughts on it, even from maybe how you engage your players into kind of like playing their character in a different way, or if you've ever improv something into existence, such as the Sword of a Thousand Truths, and have had problems with it, and then you've unwound it, or what have been your experience with it? Let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. Also, we are on YouTube, so go ahead and smash that like button, ring the notification bell, all that good stuff, and review the podcast, subscribe to it. Tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the podcast. And thank you for listening. So that's going to wrap us up for this week. For Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.